About the Orlando 1992, the film is directed by Sally Potter and adapted from Orlando biography. And the main case is Tilda Swinton, which has running time 1 hour 34 minutes. For the plot summary, the story begins in Elizabethan England around 1600. Queen Elizabeth I gives Orlando a special command, which is she said, "Do not fade, do not wither, do not grow old." As a result, Orlando remains young while centuries pass. During the journey, Orlando experiences love and heartbreak, political life, literary ambitions, social transformation, gender transformation from male to female, and the story finally reaches the modern world of the 1990s. About the original literary work, Virginia Woolf wrote Orlando, a biography, in 1928. The novel was inspired Woolf's close friend and lover, which is Vita Sackville in the West. Because of its unusual narrative, changing gender identity, and 4th-century timeline, many critics consider the novel difficult to adapt into film. The adaptation, the film from novel to film, it has similarities and differences. The similarities is it has the same protagonist, same gender transformation, same exploration of identity, same historical journey, while the differences is the film simplifies some literary details, visual storytelling replaces Woolf's complex narration, the ending is adapted to connect more directly with modern audiences. The main characters, the first is Orlando. She or he is the protagonist, live for over 400 years, experiences a life as both a man and a woman, represents personal identity beyond gender. The second is Queen Elizabeth I, grants Orlando eternal youth, symbolizes power and historical authority. The third is Sasha, Orlando's first great love, represents romantic disappointment. And the last one is Shell Meridian, Orlando's soulmate, and accepts Orlando regardless of gender. Okay, so why is Orlando 1992 considered as a biographical story? So, although Orlando is fictional, the novel and film function as a functional biography. The character Orlando was largely inspired by Vita Sackville West, while the story reflects Woolf's admiration for her. Many scholars describe the novel as a literary love letter disguised as a biography.
For the theoretical framework, we select Linda Hodgson's theory, since Linda Hodgson argues that adaptation is not simply copying, but also a process of reinterpretation and also recreation. Adaptation often involves changes because different media have different ways of telling stories. The first case is in the novel, the transformation is explained through narration and also philosophical reflection on gender and identity, while in the film, Potter presents the transformation visually through Orlando's reflection and the line, this referring to the Orlando's gender transformation. The analysis here is that Potter omits lengthy narration and emphasizes on the visual storytelling, making Woolf's idea about identity easier for film audience to understand. Through Hodgson's perspective, the movie Orlando is a reinterpretation instead of a reproduction of Virginia Woolf's novel. Potter managed to preserve the core themes of gender identity and self-discovery while changing certain elements to suit the visual medium of film. Now we select the second case, which is the ending. In the novel, Orlando's achievement is completing and publishing the oak tree, emphasizing the literary success, while in the film, Orlando is shown in the much more modern era where her daughter, emphasizing freedom, self-acceptance, and personal growth. The analysis here is that Potter shifts the focus from literary accomplishment to personal identity, reflecting her interpretation of the novel and the expectation of a contemporary audience.
So, moving on to the next theory. We are using Judith Butler's gender performativity theory. Judith Butler argues that gender is not an innate or fixed characteristic. Instead, gender is produced through repeated behaviors, social expectations, and cultural practices. Masculinity and femininity are therefore performed instead of naturally determined. Butler's theory challenges the conservative assumptions regarding gender identity. This theory is used to examine Orlando's behavior and transformation. Moreover, it also talks about the social responses to that change. Orlando provides a unique example of Butler's theory because the protagonist experiences life as both a man and woman while still maintaining the same core identity. Next, we are going to discuss cinematic representation of gender. So, before his transformation, Orlando wears clothing associated with aristocratic masculinity. Such clothing often reflects his social status and authority. After becoming a woman, Orlando's clothing becomes more restrictive and elaborate, visually representing the expectations placed upon women in society. The contrast between these costumes highlights how gender is expressed and regulated through appearance. Throughout the film, Orlando frequently looks directly into the camera and appears like speaking to the audience. This technique creates a sense of intimacy while also encourages the audience to critically reflect on the gender norms presented in the story. By breaking the fourth wall, Orlando becomes both a participant in and an observer of the social rules that govern gender. When Orlando awakens as a woman, the film presents the change without dramatic fear or confusion. Orlando calmly observes her new body and states, "Same person, no difference at all, just a different sex." This moment suggests that personal identity remains constant despite physical transformation. The scene challenges the assumption that gender alone determines an individual's identity. The film moves through different historical periods, allowing viewers to observe how expectations surrounding gender change over time. While Orlando's identity remains continuous, society's treatment towards Orlando changes. This contrast emphasizes that many gender roles are often socially constructed rather than natural or universal. To sum up, through costume, direct address, historical settings, and the transformation scene itself, the film presents gender as a social category shaped by cultural expectations. Orlando's experiences demonstrate that the opportunities and limitations associated with gender are largely determined by society rather than by inherent personal qualities.
Okay, moving on to gender roles and social expectations in Orlando. Orlando is a man, freedom of movement. As a man, Orlando can travel, explore different places, and interact with people from various social classes without facing significant restrictions. Society allows him greater personal independence and mobility. Property ownership rights. Orlando has the legal right to inherit and control family property. His social status and wealth are protected by laws that favor male heirs, giving him economic security and authority, greater political and social power. As a nobleman, Orlando is respected and listened to in society. He has access to influential social circles and enjoys privileges that are largely unavailable to women during the same period. Orlando is a woman. Transitions on inheritance. After becoming a woman, Orlando discovers that her claim to property is questioned. The legal system limits women's rights, showing how gender affects access to wealth and status. Expectations regarding marriage. Society expects Orlando to marry and fulfill traditional feminine roles. Rather than pursuing personal ambitions, women are encouraged to focus on domestic responsibilities and relationships. Reduce social freedom. Orlando experienced stricter rules regarding behavior, appearance, and reputation. Actions that were acceptable when she was a man are now judged more harshly because she is a woman. Moving on to expectations. Expectations regarding marriage. Society expects Orlando to get married and become a wife. Marriage is seen as an important duty for a woman. Orlando faced pressure to follow traditional female roles instead of living independently. Expectation regarding behavior. Women are expected to be polite, quiet, and obedient. Orlando is judged more strictly for her actions than when she was a man. Expectation regarding social roles. Women are expected to focus on family and domestic life. They have fewer opportunities to hold power or make important decisions.
Adaptation as creative reinterpretation Hutchin. Sally Pottery Orlando 1992 validates Linda Hutchin's adaptation theory, proving that adapting a text is an act of autonomous creative reinterpretation rather than literal duplication. Hutchin argued that adaptation should not be judged through the restrictive lens of fidelity, but rather as an extended process of cultural and formal relocation. While Potter remains faithful to Virginia Woolf's core themes of time, identity, and institutional patriarchy, she radically shifts the narrative from literary interiority to cinematic expression. This is best exemplified by Orlando's frequent breaks of the fourth wall. Direct address to the camera function as the cinematic equivalent of Woolf's ironic literary narrator, establishing an intimate, reflexive link with the audience and maintaining the novel's critical distance. Furthermore, by shifting the timeline to and in the contemporary 20th century, Potter transposed the source material into a new historical context. This creative transformation confirms Hutchin's view that adaptation is a dynamic form of cultural critique and continuous dialogism rather than a passive, derivative copy of a canonical original. The film's representation of gender as a fluid historical construct strongly supports Judith Butler's theory of gender performativity. Butler posits that gender is not an internal biological truth, but a stylized, socially policed repetition of acts, gesture, and consumes over time. Potter explicitly highlights this during the pivotal transformation scene in Constantinople. Standing entirely nude before a mirror, Orlando looks at the audience and states, "Same person, no different at all, just a different sex." This moment visually decouples biological sex from gender identity, directly embodying Butler's assertion that gender is manufactured discursively rather than determined anatomically. This performativity is further historicized through the strategic use of costuming. In the 18th century sequence, the newly female Orlando struggled to navigate her estate as her massive, restrictive crinoline skirt repeatedly collides with furniture. The dress served as a literalization of Butler's theory. It is an active social technology that restricts, police, and shape the female body according to societal expectations by staging gender as a shifting, theatrical costume across 4 centuries. The film demonstrates that identity exists entirely in the doing rather than the being.
So here are the conclusion of our group discussion. So based on the analysis of Orlando 1992, directed by Sally Potter and adapted from Orlando, a biography by Virginia Woolf, it can be concluded that the film successfully transforms a complex literary work into a visual narrative while preserving the novel's central themes of identity, gender, time, and social change. Rather than functioning as a direct reproduction of the original text, the film demonstrates how adaptation can serve as a creative process of reinterpretation. Through visual storytelling, cinematic techniques, and changes to certain narrative elements, Potter creates a version of Orlando that remains faithful to the spirit of Woolf's novel while making it accessible to the modern audiences. And by using Linda Hutchins' adaptation theory, Orlando can be viewed as a creative reinterpretation rather than a direct copy of Virginia Woolf's novel. Sally Potter transforms Woolf's complex narration into visual storytelling, direct audience engagement, and symbolic imagery, while adapting certain elements such as the ending to emphasize personal growth and self-acceptance. These changes demonstrate how an adaptation can preserve the original themes while making them more effective on a different medium. In addition, the film also strongly reflects Judith Butler's theory of gender performativity by showing that Orlando's identity remains unchanged despite the transformation from male to female. The famous line, "the same person, no difference at all, just a different sex," emphasizes that identity is not determined by the biological sex alone. Through costume, social interactions, and historical settings, the film illustrates how gender roles are created and maintained by the society. Orlando's experiences reveal that the opportunities, rights, and restrictions associated with gender are not natural, but are shaped by cultural expectations and social norms. Furthermore, Orlando's journey across 4 centuries highlights how gender expectations change over time, while the character's core identity remains constant. As a man, Orlando enjoys freedom, property rights, and social authority. But as a woman, Orlando faces legal, social, and personal restrictions. These contrasting experiences expose the unequal treatment of men and women and demonstrate how a patriarchal system influences individual lives. Overall, Orlando is both a successful literary adaptation and a powerful exploration of gender identity, encouraging audiences to question traditional assumptions about gender, power, and selfhood, while recognizing the fluid and socially constructed nature of identity. Thank you.